kerjasama antara pemerintah Indonesia, dalam hal ini Kementerian Kebudayaan dan Pariwisata, dengan salah satu organisasi internasional seperti yang kami sebutkan tadi, yaitu World Intellectual Property Organization atau disingkat dengan WIPO. Dan kami sudah pernah menyelenggarakan beberapa workshop sebelumnya, yaitu pada tahun 2009 workshop tentang industri kreatif di Bandung, dan workshop yang terkait dengan industri musik yang dilaksanakan di Jakarta. Nah, pada hari ini, hari yang berbahagia ini, WIPO sangat mendukung untuk penyelenggaraan workshop yang terkait dengan film di Yogyakarta, dan 2 hari sebelumnya, yaitu pada tanggal 13 dan 14 kemarin, telah diselenggarakan workshop yang serupa di Jakarta. Di Jakarta workshop dihadiri oleh insan-insan perfilman dan juga instansi pemerintah yang terkait, dengan peserta sekitar hampir 100 orang. Dan tujuan dari workshop ini adalah untuk meningkatkan wawasan kita semua, baik itu dari instansi pemerintah maupun instansi perfilman, mengenai masalah copyright di industri perfilman, termasuk diantaranya terkait dengan kontrak dan distribusi, serta diharapkan dari penyelenggaraan workshop ini kita bisa berbagi pengalaman apa yang terjadi di negeri kita, baik itu di Jogja, dan apa sebenarnya yang terjadi di luar Indonesia. Mungkin nanti kami persilakan Bapak Ibu untuk berpartisipasi aktif dan menanyakan banyak terhadap Prof. F, karena beliau mempunyai pengalaman yang banyak, beliau berkecimpung di Hollywood. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, kami mengucapkan terima kasih yang sebesar-besarnya kepada pembicara kita pada pagi hari ini. Ketiga-tiganya beliau ada di depan kita, dan juga kami mengucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran Bapak Ibu yang untuk meluangkan waktunya sebagai peserta workshop. Semoga workshop ini sangat bermanfaat buat kita semua. Mr. Nahil and Mr. Rotep, on behalf of the government of Indonesia and also on behalf of the government of Yogyakarta, I would like to extend our highest appreciation for your support in making 2 workshops possible, both in Jakarta and today in Yogyakarta. I think this is a beginning cooperation between WIPO, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and also the government of Yogyakarta. And we hope that in the future we can also undertake more activities in the field of film for our community here in Yogyakarta.
Terima kasih, Mbak Ike. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be a moderator for this workshop. My name is Gilang Desti Paraita, as has been mentioned by Mbak Ike. I am from Jurusan Ilmu Komunikasi Universitas Gajah Mada. Saya di sini akan membantu Mr. Rotaf, Ms. Donanya, dan Pak Tino Saranggala untuk mendiskusikan tema besar kita pada hari ini, yaitu workshop on copyright for film professionals, di mana pada hari ini kita akan bersama-sama sampai pukul 4 sore. Dan untuk sesi yang pertama kita akan lebih banyak mendiskusikan permasalahan copyright. Nah, untuk sesi pertama ini akan disampaikan oleh ketiga pembicara sekaligus. Namun sebelumnya mungkin saya perkenalkan terlebih dahulu siapakah beliau ini di balik wajah-wajah mereka yang ganteng-ganteng dan cantik. Saya perkenalkan terlebih dahulu.
Intellectual property consists of several disciplines. It is patents, about patents, trademarks, industrial designs, and copyright. And I'm coming from the copyright sector, which is a small group of about 23 of us working in the field. I'm not a lawyer, so don't ask me any legal questions. But if there are lawyers in the room, please feel free to interject at any point in time if you feel that some of what we say does not apply to Indonesian law. Perhaps I can ask right away, are there any lawyers in the room? Indonesian lawyers?
Sorry, ada yang dari latar belakang hukum di antara teman-teman yang hadir?
Okay, great. Are you entertainment lawyer, copyright lawyer? What kind of?
Anda pengacara dengan sekarang bidang kerjanya entertainment, di bidang entertainment atau di copyright?
Okay. Copyright? Not copyright. Okay. Okay, so I can say anything. No. All right. But essentially, copyright. At WIPO, there are two aspects of what we do. There is the norm-setting activities, and then there is the capacity-building activities. In the norm-setting group, which are my colleagues dealing with copyright law, they deal with the work in the area of developing norms. I'm working in collaboration with our member states, of which Indonesia is one of our member states. Copyright law, the treaties that are relevant to copyright are the Berne Convention, the Rome Convention, the WIPO Copyright Treaty, and the WIPO Performance and Phonograms Treaty, which are also called the Internet Treaties. These are the foundation for copyright law. But what does it mean to you? Well, as a member state signatory to these conventions, you have obligations. These obligations also mean that you have an Indonesian Copyright Act. I don't have it here with me. Actually, I do, but it's amongst these papers. But if you actually want to have a reading of this act, it's actually quite interesting because in it, there's an article that also refers to some of your rights. And then one specific rights deals with licensing. And that's why we're here today. We're here just to introduce to you your basic rights and how what it means to actually transact these rights, the economic consequences of these activities. I'm going to try to go down on the. Oops, yes, there we go. So, function of copyright at the national level. Well, copyright actually provides you with some exclusive rights, and these exclusive rights convert into intellectual creations. And that's what actually, as filmmakers, you do. You actually are producing a product of your minds. These are your intellectual creations. And these objects, and these creations are created into objects of contract making and licensing. Now these rights, which include, I'm going to read them so I don't forget them. The rights of reproduction, the right of distribution, the right to communicate to the public, the right of public performance, and the right of broadcasting. These are very important rights that you have because these give you bargaining power. These bargaining power is important when it comes time for you to negotiate your contracts. For example, as individual or small and medium-sized enterprises, you have a weaker bargaining power as opposed to, like, say, studios, the majors, i.e. coming out of Hollywood. But if you know your rights, if you have a very good understanding of your rights, you increase your bargaining power. So understanding your basic rights is important. Now these licensing and contract making actually turn into rights that can actually produce transaction costs and actually are the basis for economic activities. And one of the projects that we, in my division, which is the capacity building, the research, the technical assistance that we do, is we try to understand the importance of copyright. So we developed a methodology in 2003, and this is the guide, I'll show you afterwards, we're not trying to, with this study, we're just trying to understand the economic importance, or rather the performance of the copyright-based industries. With this methodology, what it does is that it provides us with consistency. It enables us to have a cross-sectoral and international comparison For example, this study has been undertaken so far in about 33 countries. The government of Indonesia has started their survey on the economic importance of the copyright-based industries. It's not finished yet, based on this methodology, that is. But I believe we might have some of the researchers here this afternoon. And your contribution to that study, to that survey, is very important. Now, I know that the Ministry of Trade has done such a study, has done a study on the economic importance of copyright, but it's a different methodology. But based from what I heard from yesterday, the contribution to GDP of the creative industries was about 6.3%. So that's a rather high percentage already, just based on their standards. I know it includes more industries than just the copyright-based industries, but already that's indicative of how important your industry is. What is special, unique about our methodology is that we link it to copyright and to the activities of the economic activities, which is the rights of reproduction and distribution. And so these are the studies, and we've got 3 volumes so far of these studies. So if you are interested in reading about, for example, the film industry and the economic performance in the US or in Canada or Singapore, Russia, these are compiled in these studies. I don't have any here with me, but if you have any interest in reading some of these studies, feel free to look on our website. I believe some of them are available. We also decided to take this approach because creativity in itself is very difficult to measure. There is no one definition in itself for creativity. So by taking copyright, because it is an approach, we've done so because it's a very well-defined concept. Not only does it have economic rights, it also has moral rights. Copyright also aims to balance, to create a balance between the individual and the public interests. It is also a financial mechanism whereby one can actually reward creators, for example, in terms of royalties. And believe it or not, it is fundamental to not just the creator, but to huge industries. In fact, you'll hear in this context, the film industry in America lobby very strongly on stronger protection for copyright. And that is truly because they see it as fundamental to their survival. Our tool also is not just in terms of economics, but it's also in terms of employment. We can also identify the contribution in terms of employment. I'll come to that later. So, how did we do this? Well, first of all, we divided, it's not an easy, coming up with the methodology wasn't so straightforward, but we did it and wanted the system to be very transparent and to be based on statistics. So we divided the copyright-based industries into 4 groups. And I think a strong component of the core industries are in this room today. That is, if you are in the motion picture and video industry as a filmmaker, a producer, or a script writer, if there are script writers in the room, or if you're a performer, that's related, right? That's the issue. If you are a director, we can actually identify you in your national statistics, not just in terms of economic contribution, in terms of revenue, but also in terms of the cultural value. There are interdependent industries that are also looked at, and these are, for example, manufacturers and producers of televisions, of the CDs. And I don't think we have any in this room, really. I doubt that. And then there are the partial and non-dedicated industries. We can go into more, if you have questions on these, and how it applies to the Indonesian context, perhaps when the researcher gets here this evening, we can go through it more. These are just some of the results the studies. For example, based on micro-methodology, you can see that in terms of percentage, the copyright-based industries, the total share was 4.77, and of that 4.77, 1.55 was from the core. The trend that one notices in these studies is that the core industries, normally it's on general the press and publishing, they're the largest contributor to the copyright-based industries, and then after that you will see software, and that's just in the last 5 to 10 years, 5 to 8 years, and then comes the film industry. So on average, the film industry is the 3rd largest contributor to GDP. And this is also in terms of employment, and we can go through some of these details if you want to have some more questions. Today is about the film industry, or in terms of classification, the motion picture and video classification. So why we are here today is we just want to stress the importance that each and every one of you have to this industry, and not just. I always want to include the allied services, which are the services that are the printers, the editors. So that's one part of our work. That's the economic performance. We're now also starting on development of a methodology to assess the social and cultural impact of intellectual property or rather copyright in the creative industries. What do I mean by that? Today there are a lot of discussions about reforming the copyright system. But member states at WIPO would like to have some kind of evidence. We can probably, when each country does its service, we can give them perhaps some quantitative and empirical evidence. But we also need to give them some qualitative evidence, if you want to call it that. And so we're trying to develop a survey where countries can then use as a basis for surveying their copyright-based industries. And let me just give you an example of how we're trying to develop these indicators. I've been given this example because it's the easiest one to really get across, and especially in this context. For example, in 1933 there was a book that was published called Lost Horizon. The author, his name was James Hilton, and he created this fictional utopian city which was in the Himalayas, and he called the city Shangri-La. Does everybody know this term? You've heard of Shangri-La? You haven't heard of Shangri-La? Oh, really? It's in the English language, perhaps. Is it common? Do anybody in this audience know the term? It's quite a common term, actually. I mean, so much so that it's entered the everyday language in the English language. But this gentleman never visited the Himalayas. He actually based Shangri-La on a number of sources, which including an isolated town in California. He based his knowledge of the Himalayas also on travel books by an American explorer called Joseph Robb, who actually visited the region in the 1920s and 30s. The book was a great success, and so much so that quite a few films were based on it. And it created a legend in the American minds, at least in the North American and European readers. And so today, Shangri-La is known as a utopian city, or rather the concept it's a term used for a lost utopia and a mindset. So on this first level of analysis, Hilton's fictions actually relies on, in part, on the use and the refunctioning of a number of cultural works, including a copyrighted work, a non-fiction work. These were transformed by his imagination into a new copyright work, which was the novel Lost Horizon. So one economic and cultural output is built on the back of each other. At a further stage, Hilton's book, unlike the non-fiction travel book by Joseph Brown, provides an additional follow-on economic output in terms of film rights and the production and distribution of film. And these have their appended economic outputs. But these also have cultural impacts. For example, one outcome of the book was that the former president of the United States named his presidential retreat Shangri-La. It was then renamed Camp David by Eisenhower. Then in this U.S., keep it in the U.S. context, so forgive me for that. A U.S. soul band was called, they named themselves Shangri-La, and also a lot of restaurants, chains, call themselves, use the word Shangri-La. So much so, in 2001, in China, there was a competition for different counties as to who would be named Shangri-La, and the Zhongjiang County was renamed Shangri-La, and that was also used to attract tourists. So these were primarily cultural outcomes from Hilton's novel, which in turn produced new economic, social, and environmental impacts. So the name and concept of Shangri-La, legend, an ideal that was created originally by the novel, was spread across the world.
That we imported and distributed in the United States. But things changed. Obviously, the number of Indonesian films went down after that, but now has come back strongly, and you're making 100 movies a year, and you have a huge internal audience, and that seems to be growing with the middle class. So it's a completely different world from when I started just 20 years ago. And what I do now is I do financial and business consulting. And that means that I work with filmmakers, I work with lawyers, I work with bankers, usually to try to determine how to pay for the creation of a movie. So how to finance a film, how to secure distribution for a film, what the best ways are to earn money, and making sure that that money is returned to the proper people, which is always a problem everywhere. People in the film industry are very suspicious of other people. There are always problems that someone takes the money that isn't supposed to take the money, and yeah, that's always been a problem everywhere in the world. There's no easy solution to it, but one of the solutions is to be able to establish clearly who owns the rights to receive the revenues from the movie. And that is all about copyright and owning the copyright. And one of the examples I like to use is, imagine if there were no laws about the ownership of property. Who would want to build a house on land or a hotel on land that they weren't sure if they owned the land? Someone could come and take that land tomorrow and they would lose their investment in their house and they couldn't complain. So we're all very lucky that there's a good system to know who owns the property, who owns the property this hotel sits on. If they didn't know, they wouldn't build this hotel. The investment could be lost immediately, but we have strong property rights. We should also have strong property rights in creative works. And that's what the basis of intellectual property is. It encourages investment. It encourages investors to put money into a film if they know that what they have in the end is a piece of property. And you could lose that property if you don't do all of the paperwork correctly, including licensing the screenplay, licensing the music. And if you can demonstrate that what you're creating as filmmakers is property that can generate revenue, then the business community will be more interested in investing money. Banks will loan money because you were developing collateral, you're developing real property that they can loan money against. And unfortunately, then there'll be a legal community, a bunch of lawyers who will try to make money by doing all of the paperwork, by filing legal complaints. So my part of the business is all about the bankers and the lawyers and the investors and people who have regulations about the film business. And one of the bad sides, right now in Indonesia, I think that the creative community is very strong and the business community isn't as strong. And part of that is because of the monopoly system in the distribution, in the theatrical distribution. And I've done business for more than 20 years now with Benny Suherman and with Harish Lasmana. I feel like I'm good friends with Harish. He's always treated me fairly. He's a good businessman. And so I won't say anything against the 21 group, but it's important to realize that the business community in Indonesia for film is very small. The creative community is big, but all of the other parts that are necessary for the growth of the industry need to grow also. The distribution community, the financing community, investment. So I hope that by strengthening property law, by strengthening belief in copyright, that the business community will also grow. And so that's one of the things you have to think about is what you're doing is encouraging investment, encouraging people to give you money, to spend more money making better movies, and hopefully that will be the result. We had a great few days in Jakarta, and we certainly learned a huge amount about the progress of the Indonesian film industry, and it's very impressive. You certainly made a great start, and I know that some Indonesian films are offered to the international market. I know that Ram is offering Little Obama internationally. Gop Santani is always at the Cannes Film Festival and the American film market selling his movies. And I think that my understanding is that you as Yogya filmmakers are, let me try to put this nicely. The people in Jakarta were saying that the Yogya filmmakers care about art. They care about creativity, and they want to make high-quality movies, and you don't care anything about making money. Is that true? So, it's right. We have the same situation in the United States. In California, people think we just care about making money in Hollywood. That's all we care about. In New York, they care about the art. There are some filmmakers in New York who've been working on the same script for 15 years. I see them, I say, so what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this. You were working on that 5 years ago. Yeah. And they think that's a good thing, that they're suffering for their art, and they're creating something with lasting value. And I say, how do you eat? How do you pay your rent? What do you do? And so, in Los Angeles, it's a business. We refer to, we don't say Hollywood in Los Angeles, we say the industry. The industry, because in Los Angeles, it's the industry. You go to a Starbucks coffee shop, and half the people are on their computers working on scripts in the middle of the day. And then you go to restaurants in Century City, and everyone is a business person, bankers and lawyers, and every conversation you hear is about money. They're not talking about, I read this script and it was so beautiful, it made me cry. They're saying, my client's going to get 3% of gross, and the defined gross terms are that the costs are going to come out of the top, and then there's going to be a 3% interest factor, and then that's film talk in Los Angeles. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you don't care about making money, and you don't care, but you do care about people investing and giving you money to make your movies. And also, those investors care about getting money back, and both of you care about people seeing your movie. You know, even people who claim that they don't want to make commercial films, they don't want to make mainstream movies, you want people to see your movie. And so there's still going to be rules and procedures and all of those terrible things that you have to respect in order, in the end, to have a movie that they'll put in the movie theaters here, or that will receive distribution, hopefully one day, distribution outside of Indonesia, and win the Cannes Film Festival, and get on screens in France and the US. And I think that's ultimately everyone's goal as a filmmaker, is to have people sit in a dark room and watch a huge screen with your movie on it. And so for that to happen, your movie has to be between 80 minutes long and 200 minutes long. It has to have the normal things. It has to have sound that moves with people's mouths. It has to have focus. It has to be a focus. And I joke about those things, but you'd be surprised about how many movies don't respect even the most basic rules of filmmaking. And filmmakers who make movies that are 50 minutes long. There's a 50-minute movie isn't a short, and it's not a feature. So business people don't know what to do with that. And in the same way, we don't know what to do with a movie that doesn't have copyright paperwork. You could make the most beautiful film in the world, and it can have a lot of music in it, and you think, wow, that beautiful music, that's great. It's not famous music, nobody knows it, but maybe it's your brother or your father's music, and he said, yeah, use it in the movie. But if you take that to a sales agent, like Tina was talking about, the sales agent will say, where is your contract for the copyright to this music? And if you can't produce that copyright...
The idea and the music only, or what is actually need to be registered?
Nothing needs to be registered. You have copyright protection when you create the work. So the registration process is not necessary to protect the copyright. What's important is that all of the creative elements that make the movie, the music, the screenplay, there's some kind of contract with the author, with the musician. And it doesn't have to be a complicated contract. It can be a very simple contract, and all it has to do is state that the copyright has been given for use in this movie. And it can get more complicated. It can say it can be used for this movie, it can be used for 50 years, it can be used for sound, for a CD release, other movies, but students don't need to do that. Students can, they have the right most students write the script for their own movie. And so they own that script, they own it's just if there's any other creative material that comes from the outside, it's important to make sure that's included by contract. But simple contracts, no need to register. If the faculty should teach best practices and talk to the students about that, but if they don't do it, then in the end it's their problem. It's not the faculty's problem. So. They should get a bad grade though.
I'll give you again our example at our school. For example, in my little feature, feature is fiction, but maybe 15 minutes long. I had some music. I had Lionel Richie, and for an exercise, a film exercise, no problem. But I know that if I was ever to be interested in commercially exploiting that movie on the outside, either I would have to get rid of that get rid of that music clip and put in some other music that was either in the public domain, or have to go through the process just like filmmakers do in the real world, go through the agreements and so forth. So as a school exercise, this is fine because you're using it in an educational context. But it's once you start going out there and trying to commercialize it, trying to so on and so forth, use it in that way, that you're going to have to start, going about the process as one should. As again, there's no registration necessary, but in some countries, it's not mandatory at all anywhere in the world. However, some countries have the facility for you to register your works. I think, as in, so I read in your Copyright Act, that you have that possibility. Sometimes when you register, you also attach the contracts to that registry, to whatever you deposit. Sometimes that also helps the person who wants to clear rights also know who owns the rights, the day, the time. That also gives additional information for somebody who then one day wants to clear rights. So if it doesn't really, that acts, I don't know if the registration system here acts as a clearinghouse as well here in Indonesia, but some collecting societies or clearinghouses acts also for when people want to clear rights, they have that information, and it includes the licenses.
Tadi jawaban dari Rob adalah sebenarnya copyrightnya itu yang bisa ada copyright itu ketika sudah terjadi produksinya dan ada barangnya, sekali lagi sudah ada bentuknya gitu. Tapi untuk misalnya film dari mahasiswa tadi harus ada kontrak aja sih, sebenarnya simple aja, nggak terlalu usah yang panjang-panjang, tapi cukup sederhana aja, cuma menyatakan bahwa film ini atau materi yang ada dalam film ini bisa digunakan berapa lama, segala macam. Kalau dari tambahan yang dari Donna, sebenarnya ini adalah untuk melindungi dari karya itu sendiri. Kalau memang masih dalam lingkungan sekolah mungkin fine, masih bisa kita gunakan gitu kapanpun tanpa harus bayar. Tapi ketika suatu karya ini punya di masa depan punya nilai komersil, ini yang bisa dijadikan perlindungan jika ada kontrak tersebut. Bang Tina mau menambahkan?
Ya, mungkin gini ya bedanya ya. Kalau Pak Rob sama Bu Dona itu memikirkan, jadi dari pihak di Barat itu yang dipikirkan adalah apapun yang kita buat, realita di sana itu sebetulnya adalah hak cipta kita, nggak perlu dibahas lagi. Itu apapun yang kita buat itu memang ciptaan kita, selesai titik. Nah sekarang gimana kita melindungi ciptaan kita? Nah, melindungi ciptaan kita adalah dengan membuat yang tadi elemen menjengkelkan itu menjadi sempurna. Kan itu yang kita bahas dari tadi, ya kan? Tapi di kita, ya di Indonesia ini itu justru kita merasa bahwa kalau kita mau melindungi yang memang sudah milik kita ini, itu harus kita daftarkan, kan itu yang tadi yang Pak Davi bertanya kan, Pak Davi kan itu yang dibahas kan. Nah, sebenarnya itu ada perjanjian internasional dan kita Republik Indonesia juga ikut menandatangani itu, masalah hak cipta itu. Jadi 100 karya yang sudah dimiliki oleh ISI itu memang milik ISI. Kalau memang semuanya original. Jadi kalau musiknya original, gambar apa semua, ide apa semua itu bisa dibuatkan administrasinya untuk melindungi. Kalau ada yang nyontek, nah disitulah baru Anda bergerak. Ya kan, bahwa mereka nyontek, ini buktinya, ini kita yang punya, kita duluan, kita tahun segini dan seterusnya. Ya kan itu yang ininya. Kita punya, jadi kita punya modal untuk bergerak itu kalau elemen menjengkelkannya sempurna. Ya kan? Nah, itu bedanya mungkin dari tadi kita kayak ngobrol yang kita bingung itu. Sebetulnya kalau di kita baru merasa aman kalau sudah didaftarkan di lembaga hak cipta. Kan itu yang kita bahas. Tapi sebetulnya secara konvensi internasional, kalau memang kita yakin itu karya kita, kalau itu kolaborasi kita dapat bukti tertulis bahwa memang yang membuat musik, yang membuat ini A, B, C, D itu semua memang sudah ada kerjasama bahwa itu memang menjadi milik, sehingga memang produser lah kasarnya yang menjadi pemegang itu sertifikat tanahnya itu film, itu produser yang pegang, itu sudah aman gitu loh. Jadi kalau isi bisa semua murid-muridnya ini kalau memang dianggap itu produksi isi, ya udah aman kalau isi punya itu gitu loh. Jadi bukan masalah mendaftarkan yang penting, justru bahwa memang kalau ada yang mencoba mencontek kita bisa bilang ini saya punya. Itu kira-kira apa cukup jelas Pak ya?
Mbak Gilang kalau
Jadi
boleh,
tanahnya nggak bakal diserobot Pak ya?
Mbak Gilang mungkin ada share sedikit dari
Sepertinya kita tunda dulu untuk pertanyaan dari Bapak siapa?
share, kita mau share sedikit. Pak Hadi mau share soal
Pak Hadi.
Oh Pak Hadi, ya. Silakan saja Pak ya.
Ya. Ini orang tua betul ini.
Selamat sore. Kebetulan saya pernah jadi dekan Fakultas Film dan Televisi Institut Kesenian Jakarta. Saya kira masalah ini kita jadikan semacam simulasi. Jadi jalan keluarnya waktu itu ketika teman-teman mahasiswa itu membuat TKA, maka kita jadikan sebuah simulasi bagaimana mereka sejak awal harus sudah mulai menghormati karya masing-masing. Satu, mereka harus membuat kontrak sederhana. Ketika mereka bikin TKA, artinya setiap anggota TKA itu, kelompok itu sudah share berapa persentase yang mereka setorkan kepada kelompok untuk membuat karya itu. Kedua, ketika kameramen, sutradara dan masing-masing itu mereka membuat surat pernyataan bahwa dalam pembuatan produksi ini mereka sudah menandatangani kontrak di antara mereka sendiri, artinya disaksikan oleh pembimbing dengan bermeterai. Dengan begitu sudah hukumnya sudah kuat. Persoalannya apa? Kenapa kita berbuat begini? Karena kalau dijadikan peserta festival film internasional menjadi persoalan yang rumit nanti. Sehingga kalau sejak awal sudah mereka tekan kontrak dan pihak kampus mengetahui sebagai karya bersama mereka, itu kita sudah aman. Artinya kita sudah aman. Jadi dijadikan saja hak cipta sopan santun produksi ini sebagai sebuah simulasi produksi untuk menuju dunia sopan santun copyright internasional gitu kira-kira. Jadi aman kita. Jadi sambil belajar sambil mendidik. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Hadi atas share-nya, sangat berguna sekali. Saya sendiri tadi juga sempat bertanya dalam hati, apakah memang tidak ada proses dalam proses pendidikan itu sendiri untuk menumbuhkan kesadaran itu? Ternyata ada, cuma mungkin untuk di dunia profesional memang harus perlu ditegaskan kembali begitu. Nah, ini saya mendapatkan informasi dari Mr. Roban bahwa beliau memiliki satu case tadi yang sangat menarik mengenai copyright itu sendiri. Jadi sebelum kita beralih ke pertanyaan yang lain, mungkin kita sempatkan waktu ya untuk menyaksikan ya case tadi ini. Is it a movie or?
No. I like very much the question about creativity, and I wanted to talk about that because the more money is involved, the more different people have opinions about what the final movie should be. And that creates problems everywhere in the world, and one of the biggest problems is that most scripts, most screenplays are really, really bad. I've read thousands of screenplays. Most of them are terrible. But of course the people who wrote them think that they're brilliant. So, and when I say terrible, they might be interesting works of literature, but they're not movies. They're not the kind of movie that anyone will sit and watch. And I always told people that I can usually tell you why your script will never be a movie. I don't know if I can help someone make a script into a movie, but I can say, this is the reason no one wants to make your script. There are thousands and thousands of scripts, original scripts in Los Angeles right now. And a few, maybe 100 of those will be made into movies. It's very, very high competition, and the more money is involved, the harder it is to maintain what we call creative control.
Kali ini Rob akan berbicara tentang kreativitas. Ternyata kalau menurut dari pengalamannya itu banyak sekali naskah yang skenario film yang beribu mungkin yang sudah dia baca, tapi nggak semuanya itu bagus gitu. Apalagi ketika mulai masuk ke tahap produksi atau masih di praproduksi, ketika uang sudah berbicara itu bisa jadi menentukan juga bentuk akhirnya sebuah film. Kebanyakan naskah yang dia baca itu jelek, tapi yang mereka buat itu kalau yang Rob lihat itu bukan sebuah film, tapi hanya merupakan sebuah karya tulis aja. Jadi masih jauh sekali perjalanannya menjadi sebuah film. Tapi Rob udah bisa bilang bahwa ini jelek, ini nggak akan bisa jadi film. Dia sudah bisa menceritakan itu ketika dia mulai membaca skrip tersebut.
One of the most difficult things for a creative person in the film industry to learn is how to work with people who want to change your creative work. Because that's the film business, people will want to change the creative work of the screenwriter or the director. It's the business, it's the way it works. How people deal with that will make a good movie or a bad movie. Sometimes there are people on the business side, even lawyers, and even people like me, that have read so many scripts, seen so many movies, that we have good advice. It's not just to make a movie more commercial and more popular, but to make it better. So when I read a script, I write notes. I give pages of comments. Maybe they want to hear them, maybe they don't. But to know when you should listen to those comments and when you need to strongly defend your creativity is a very difficult question everywhere in the world, and I'm sure it probably is the same here, but if not, it will be, as more and more money is put into the movies.
Sebenarnya proses kreatifnya sendiri itu sama dimanapun. Tapi salah satu kesulitan yang dimiliki orang-orang kreatif adalah sebenarnya bagaimana bekerja sama dengan orang kreatif lainnya untuk menciptakan suatu produk yang bagus. Jadi suatu naskah itu tidak hanya dilihat dari segi komersialnya saja, tapi juga apakah film ini bisa menjadi sebuah film yang bagus. Jadi ketika Rob membaca naskah film tersebut, dia membuat banyak catatan-catatan bahwa ini gak bagus.
This movie, The Body, is a movie I worked on about 10 years ago. And it's a good example of bad behavior with creativity. The screenwriter-director, whose name is Jonas McCord, wrote this. There was a book, and he wrote a screenplay based on the book. All the copyrights were fine, no problem. But every time we had a small criticism of part of the script, he would change it. He wouldn't try to defend the script. He wouldn't say, oh, it has to be like this because of this reason. He would just change it every time. He desperately wanted to make this movie, and so he would do anything to please us, the producers. And that was terrible. We want someone's creative vision in the movie. But sometimes there are things that we don't understand. We're the audience. We say, I don't understand why this person falls in love with that person. That's one of the most common things. Suddenly these people meet, and the next thing they're in love. Why? What, do they like each other? What, do they have friends in common? We don't know. They're in love. And that's very common. And so we didn't understand parts of the script, but instead of explaining them, he changed the script. The movie's very bad, and he has never directed another movie. And so I'm not saying you should always listen to the people who are funding the movie or who have comments for you. It's your it's the creative person's responsibility to defend their creativity, but they also need to listen because there are a lot of good ideas, and film is usually has many fathers. So yeah, this was a terrible example of what to do with all those comments.
Rob memberikan contoh film The Body yang naskahnya dia baca 10 tahun lalu. Itu adalah naskah yang berdasarkan sebuah buku. Berdasarkan sebuah buku dan secara copyright nggak ada masalah. Tapi ketika naskah itu dikembangkan, banyak sekali perubahan-perubahan yang dilakukan oleh si sutradara, karena si sutradara itu terlalu mendengar apa kata, apa komentar dari pihak yang punya uang, yaitu produser. Jadi dirubah lagi, jadi nggak pernah selesai gitu. Tapi akhirnya si sutradara itu nggak pernah bikin film lagi, kalau saya nggak salah dengar tadi. Tapi yang coba Rob ingin sampaikan adalah jangan selalu mendengar apa kata orang lain ketika kita mengembangkan satu naskah gitu kan. Karena kadang-kadang ya kita juga masih punya daya kreativitas kita juga masih punya apa ya tadi kalau dibilang semangat seperti itu. Jadi kita masih juga punya visi kreatif kita yang bisa kita sampaikan di situ. Jadi nggak perlu selalu mendengar apa kata yang punya uang.
So the producer, director, writer brought us this project, and we liked it. We liked the script, we liked the ideas. So the first thing we did was we signed a option agreement with him to develop the project. That meant that we confirmed that he had the rights to the book and that it was based on, and we established a separate company. I think it was called The Body Productions, and that company signed an agreement to acquire the right to make the movie based on the script that was based on the book. So you've got a chain of documents that confirm the right to make the movie. So we signed those, and also director agreements. Antonio Banderas, who was a bigger star then, but Antonio Banderas was the star of this movie. And that was right after he made Zorro, so it was a good time. And so we got those agreements signed. Then the agreement with the producer said, we will make this movie for a budget of $15 million. And in exchange for that, we get the rights to distribute the movie in the entire world, to make sequels, to do remakes, to publish books based on the movie. We got all the rights that we could, and then it also said what our responsibilities were and how we were going to get the money. We didn't have $15 million. We were going to take the movie and sell it before it was made and use those contracts to get a loan at a bank. So, one of our responsibilities was, after the film was released, we would issue statements to the producer telling him how much money we made and what amount of money was his. So first we get to recover all of our expenses of making the movie, and then we split the money with the producer. So one of the important things that you should learn as much about as possible if you're in this situation is the ways that those monies are accounted for. The accounting is difficult to understand, and this is one example. This is from Warner Brothers. This is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, big hit movie around the world. This is saying that the film, it says how much the film made, the defined gross. So according to this, the defined gross was 162 million in the United States and 256 million in the rest of the world. So the film made a lot of money. And I think there it says it made a total of $512 million. So then you have the expenses. You have how much did the film cost to make? How much did the prints cost? The advertising, the worldwide advertising cost for the movie, $131 million to advertise the movie. Incredible. So it's got all the different payments. The total, revenue minus the release expenses, $200 million. And then what was the investment? The negative cost at the top is how much it cost to make the movie. According to this, it cost $315 million to make Harry Potter. So you can imagine that the movie is probably never going to have a profit. If you include the interest cost, which was another $67 million in interest costs, they're currently losing $167 million. And that was a hit movie. So this is the problem. It's very difficult to make money with a movie, and as a producer, it's very difficult to get the distribution company to honestly report, to give you a proper share of the money. It's always been a problem. I don't have a solution, except get as much money in advance as possible.
Masih berbicara soal The Body tadi, filmnya yang pertama, mereka suka mereka suka skripnya, suka naskahnya, maka akhirnya mereka bikin kontrak untuk membuat sequelnya, untuk membuat perjanjian didistribusikan seluruh dunia dan semua copyright-nya mereka punya. Tapi juga ada satu pelajaran penting, yaitu soal keuangan, di mana para pembuat film itu harus tahu cara menghitung. Salah satu contoh yang tadi Rob lihat adalah Harry Potter ya. Ternyata dengan budget segitu besar, tapi dengan hits yang besar juga. Kenapa? Sorry? Ya, dengan hits yang besar. Ya, dengan budget yang besar, dengan ini adalah film yang laris di seluruh dunia, tapi banyak sekali pengeluaran di situ yang ternyata kalau dilihat lagi ada hasilnya nol ya kalau di situ. Jadi film yang bagus secara pemasarannya juga belum tentu bisa menghasilkan keuntungan.
Oke, saya tambah dikit, itu mungkin sesuatu lagi yang agak beda. Ya, di kita itu selalu kan rumah produksi berurusan langsung dengan eksibisi ya, tempat eksibisi 21 atau bioskop atau apa. Kita berhubungan langsung. Jadi kita tahu. Ya, bahkan dengan 21, kadang-kadang itu begitu pembagian revenue yang sifatnya 50-50, itu tiba-tiba 50-50-nya itu di dalam itu ada kelihatan pengeluaran-pengeluaran yang dikeluarkan oleh 21 dalam rangka mempromosikan film, yang dibebankan juga bebannya dibagi dua. Ya, jadi bagi dua antara, jadi iklan-iklan yang muncul di koran-koran itu nanti biaya pemasangan iklan itu dibagi dua dengan pemilik film. Nah, yang tadi yang contoh dari Harry Potter itu adalah di sana kalau kita kasih film kita ke sales agent, untuk promosinya apa semua sales agent dan distributor yang bayar. Baru kemudian ada hitung-hitungan di belakang. Nah, realitanya seringkali ya distributor maupun sales agent itu begitu kirim hitung-hitungan baliknya, ya dagang aja, rugi aja terus. Jadi dia nggak punya kewajiban. Itu yang tadi Pak Rob bilang. Sebaiknya begitu kita bikin deal, misalnya bikin deal, oke, ini perkiraannya berapa nih? Kalau kita jual film ini kita pasarin di Malaysia berapa? Misalnya agentnya bilang paling $10.000 misalnya gitu. Ya udah, lo bayar dulu dan 5.000. Kita tarik dulu 5.000-nya gitu. Nanti sisanya kita hitung-hitungan. Tapi udah ada uang yang ditarik ketika kita transaksi terjadi. Dan itu yang tadi Pak Rob bilang, Jangan berharap dengan laporan, tapi tariklah uang sebanyak-banyaknya ketika di awal itu terjadi. Itu jadi ya lagi-lagi tadi kayak tadi Anda bilang, kita bicara kadang-kadang kita sebagai filmmaker kita bicara passion. Ya, tadi juga Pak Rob bilang kalau di LA sendiri itu dunia film itu terbagi dua, ada yang memang ngomongin kreatif, ada yang ngomong dagangnya, gitu loh. Nah kita di sini tahap dagangnya ini terus terang belum banyak yang mikirin. Kita baru mikir bikin filmnya aja. Nah tahap dagang inilah yang ya antara lain hari ini kita belajar jurus-jurusnya. Terima kasih.
So I mean, just comparison that basically, if you rely on the court, you'll never get any money. Right. So what you suggest is basically, as much as you set up a deal, you just get a front payment as much as possible.
So just, a lot of people say that the films lose a lot of money. Well, the fact is that that money goes somewhere. And so I looked at the results of The Body, and the US box office was almost nothing, $33,000. Terrible disaster. The Spanish box office was over 3 million euros, which is huge in Spain. It was a big hit in Spain. But when you look at who made money and who lost money, the sales agent, my company, we made a lot of money. We sold it around the world. We made, I think, 10% of everything we sold. So we made $1 million. The production team and the actors, they all got paid. Antonio Banderas made about
acquiring rights in original scripts. We're talking about acquiring the right to make a film based on a book or a play or some already pre-existing copyright comic book. Sorry?
Usually a
comic book. A lot of comic books, yeah, absolutely. In America, that is. I'll begin, we'll talk about the option agreement. If we have time, we can talk about the other agreements later, but I'm not sure we're going to. So what is an option agreement? Well, and why do you need it? Why do people enter into option agreements? Well, first of all, it's an agreement to acquire at some point in the future the film rights in, let's make it simple, talk about acquiring film rights in a book. So it's an agreement that you enter in today, whereby at some point in the future you will acquire the film rights and be able to make the film. And why to do it? Well, because one reason is based in the law of copyright, because you would need permission to adapt the book into a film script. Because otherwise, as we learned this morning, that's an infringement of the copyright in the book. So write an adaptation, make an adaptation of a book is itself an infringement of copyright unless you have permission. So you obtain the permission through the option agreement. And the other reason that you do that is because it's cheaper. Because to acquire the film rights will be quite expensive. So the option agreement allows the producer to acquire or to get itself into a position where he can acquire the film rights for a fraction of the actual cost of doing so. So I'm sure this is perfectly clear already, but I'll labour the point. So basically you spend a small amount now on acquiring the option, and when you actually need to acquire the film rights, because you've got finance to make the film, that's when you pay the full purchase price. So, with that so far, because that's the basic, you need to understand the basic concept of an option. This is so much the basic everyday tool of filmmaking in my country, is to enter into an option to acquire the film rights. One thing I would say is very important at this stage to agree all the terms of the eventual acquisition of those film rights. So to me, an option to acquire the film rights for a price to be agreed is valueless, because when you come to exercise the option and acquire those film rights, you might not be able to agree, and the courts will not enforce an agreement to agree. They won't enforce anything as vague as that. So although it's tedious sometimes, and producers don't always like this, I always say there's no point in entering into an option agreement unless you agree all the terms of the eventual acquisition. So that means you have to agree how much you're going to pay, whether it's going to be a profit share, exactly which rights you're going to acquire. The legal advice at this point is you must do that at the option stage. What have you got up there now? Not a lot. Don't worry. Did I put it on? I put it on my USB. Do you want me to get the USB? Yeah, sure. Okay. Would it help?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, we're going to actually get the option agreement so you could actually follow
What is-
what he's saying in terms of articles, clauses, and so forth. Yeah.
It's the Word doc.
It's a word.
Word doc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it's not the agreement itself, although I have an example of an option agreement. I've done a lot of this, and I found that trying to go through the agreement takes a very long time. We don't have a lot of time. So what I have is a series of checklists, and that's what you'll see when they get this document up. Here it is. So it's a checklist of what should go into an option agreement. It's not the actual agreement, because otherwise we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the actual terminology, the drafting of each clause. But it's much better, I think, at this stage for you to simply see what should be in there.
Is this okay? Is this what you wanted?
That's it. That's it. So there. This is what we've done. Starting point. Why you do it. That's all there. Then you can see. Then we go into. Have you got it? I've got it on 2 pages. Okay. Well, you need the next page then.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can double.
Thanks. What we're doing now, I just want to respond to the challenge that was thrown down to lawyers by Rob. And I agree with a lot of what he said on that. The interesting point that I want to come back on was clarity and length of documents. I always say that the most important part of my job is language. It's being able to deal with language. That's good, yeah. Because the real value I can bring to a deal is to draft an agreement which is unambiguous and cannot be challenged later as having more than one meaning. That is my job, I always think. It's not so much to be a lawyer and know the law. It's to be able to draft clear contracts. And to do that, you do need to take up a bit of space. You need a few pages, just like Rob says. But the pressure to do short agreements comes from the clients. The clients always want short agreements, yeah? And it's continual tension between the lawyer and the client. The client always wants it done on one page. And as Rob says, that can lead, and often does lead, to problems later on. It's better to let your lawyer draft the agreement the way he wants it, rather than this pressure to have short agreements. Like I say, it doesn't come from us, it always comes from the client. They say, oh, don't we just do it on one page? And so, well, we can, but there's a risk. Okay, so that's, never mind, don't worry, hopefully you'll get it. What do you want to know about an option agreement? Well, how are they normally structured? Typical option deal would be that you would pay an initial fee for 1 year option. So you have to exercise the option during that year. Or you may pay a further fee to extend the option for another year. But that is a pretty standard, basic kind of option agreement. It only lasts 2 years. If you can't exercise the option within 2 years, you lose all your rights and your money has been wasted, I'm afraid. How much would you